So welcome everybody to the February 16th, 2015 Echo and ET session. Today is kind of part two of our discussion about accessible educational or accessible instructional materials. Yep, so we're good to go. We'll do some quick introductions here in the room and then go to the individuals who joined us on the phone line. Canyon Hardesty, the coordinator of community education here at WIND.
Wendy Alameda, project coordinator for water.
Darcy Regan, speech language pathologist for WIND Water.
Julia Lausch, project coordinator for the Wyoming Vision Collaborative.
Tom, IT.
Giselle Knopf, assistive technology associate.
Felicia RC, AT specialist for WIND.
Perfect. So then we'll have our lead trainer up in sunny Oregon.
Hi everybody, I'm Gail Bowser. I'm the lead trainer for the ECHO project, which only means that I do a lot of scheduling, facilitating of trainings, mostly. Once in a while I do one.
And Scott?
I'm Scott Marfilius. I work as an independent consultant, background in special education and heavy focus in the area of AT and literacy.
Perfect. Thanks so much for joining us today. Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris Victor, language pathologist in Bighorn School District number 1. Part of the assistive technology team here, and I'm part of the water PLC for AT.
Perfect. Virginia?
Hi, I'm Virginia, and I'm a special ed teacher at Fort Washakie School in Wyoming.
Great. And this is Virginia's first time coming to an ECHO session. So thank you so much for your time and for attending and seeing what this is all about. Annie?
Hi, I'm Annie Bowers. I'm a speech language pathologist in Sheridan County School District number 2. I'm part of our District A team and also the State PLC AT team.
Great. Katie? I'm so glad you've been able to join us today. We haven't seen you for a while.
Yes, I'm glad to be here too. My name's Katie Harmon. I'm a resource teacher in School District number 2 and part of the AT team here and the PLC through Project ECHO.
Great. And Emma?
Hi, I'm Emma Christopherson, and I'm a resource teacher at Hot Springs County High School. Great.
Thanks so much for joining us, Emma. And then we'll do one more introduction. Hannah, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I'm Hannah. I'm a senior here at the University of Wyoming and was recently hired as an employee for WIND.
So we're so excited. Hannah is, and I think as everybody knows, is pursuing some graduate work to be an SLP, and we're really excited that she wanted to help us out this semester to help us do some student outcomes, and we're going to try and get her so interested in ECHO that she wants to stay here for graduate school. So any help anybody can offer us would be great, but we're excited to have Hannah for the time that we have her. So with that being said, Joy, can we turn it over to you for introductions, and then you can start the didactic session for today.
Yes, and my people have all arrived, so if you hear anybody in the background, they're mostly shorter than 4 feet tall, so in any event, I'm Joy Zabala. I wanted to last week I talked to you about some sort of general things about accessible educational materials, and I liked how you said educational, instructional, because that's all the same thing, also the learning. And this week I wanted to take you, give you a bit of a tour of the website that I mentioned last week, and also talk a little bit about the AIM Navigator. So before I start on that, though, I would like to ask if anybody has any reflections on last week, or maybe some questions came up that you didn't think about when you were in the room, but that you thought about since then, or that kept you awake or whatever. I was so clear that it all just made sense, or it was so confusing that you have no idea enough how to how to even ask a question. I think some days I feel that way myself, and I've been doing this for quite a long, long time. So with that, then I'd like to I'd like to share my screen, but I don't really want to because then I won't be able to see you. So, oh well, I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm not sure what you're going to see, but let's see. Oh, I can sort of see you. Do you see yourselves on my screen?
Mhm.
Over on the side, or do you see it like full screen?
It's a little of both, Joy. We all have a bar where we can see just you or a few people. And there's some buttons at the top that you can change that view.
Okay, is the main content big enough for you to sort of get the gist of it? Okay,
Yep.
Great. Because it helps me to be able to see you guys a bit. So we'll leave it like this. This is the new website of the National Center on Accessible Educational Materials. I mentioned last week that the AIM Center, AEM Center, has been in place since October 1st, but it was basically a continuation of the AIM Center that it was in place for 5 years before that. And before that, were 2 years of something called the AIM Consortium. And Wyoming was one of the states in the AIM Consortium. And that was 15 states working together to sort of make progress on setting up a state system to provide printed materials in accessible formats to students who require them. And it was an interesting group because there was Wyoming, and then there was New York. And so what looked like really, really different places really turned out to be that everybody sort of has the same kinds of concerns. It's just a matter of scope. Every time somebody said in Wyoming, well, we just have a small number of students who are blind, the New York people just thought that was amazing because they had billions of them. And then the other way around, in Wyoming, they would say, well, you have to go such a long way to get help. And in New York, we have too many people to ever get help. So same issues, just different reasons perhaps for those issues. And of course, for every state, the grass was always a little bit greener, or the sense that some other state was farther along than they were along was always a concern. So back to the National Center on Accessible Educational Materials, and there are two more words for learning that don't appear here. So what we're pleased about is the the emphasis this time for these 5 years is on not only availability of specialized formats, but actually using those specialized formats for learning to take place, which of course was always the goal anyway. So as you look at this website, there's a great deal of information here, and there will be even more information here. Notice that the search bar is in the upper right-hand corner. Feel free to lavishly use the search bar. I've been around this website and its predecessor for 7 years and go to the search bar probably every day. But we're hoping that the arrangement on this website will be an improved user experience for you. So when you go to About AIM, there are 5 subsections. What are accessible educational material? Who needs them? Why would you provide them? How are decisions made? And then a place for webinars and presentations. And you'll find that, oops, let me get off of that. That when you go down, the webinars and presentations are right on the home page. You can go straight to them because those are some of our primary learning experiences that we provide. And so, and also this access for learning goes also straight to the About AIM. And in the supporting learners place, one place that I would really urge you to have a look is the AIM in action, because there are some extensive but very short video stories of students who have been using AIM. And it's not just the story of the student, but also the story of the family and the story of the educators. And there's one on Una, who is blind, and one on a young man who is both blind and has a physical disability. And then there's another set on a young man who has autism, who has a print disability. His story is really interesting because people often say, but wait a minute, what does he qualify for? What does he not qualify for? Does he meet these particular requirements? And it's really interesting how his school has done some very proactive things for all their students that have made, including Bailey, with his particular both autism and print disability in everything that's going on. So I would definitely recommend that you have a look at AIM in action. And then there's need, selection, acquisition, and use. Those 4 areas are what we're going to touch on in the AIM Navigator today. And the AIM Navigator is one of the decision-making tools. We also have now, I think I mentioned last week, much more responsibility related to the availability and use of AIM in higher education, and then also in workforce. And then on the other end of the scale, in Part C, from birth to 3. So there's been some significant expansion of what we need to be thinking about. And it's not our idea at the AIM Center that we are the imparters of knowledge, but rather that we are a place where people can come together and talk about things and try to figure a lot of this out, because a lot of it is fairly new to many, many people. And so when we think about the use of AIM, well, what does that look like and what does that mean? And that's what we hope to talk to many people about, and hopefully some of you about, as we go forward. There's also a section called Policies and Systems, and it talks about both federal policy, state policy, and local policy. And when you go to the state policy part, some critical components for the quality indicators of AIM, that's sort of the guiding document, if you will, for what's happening in states around the country. There are some reports that have been done. The one thing I wanted to show you, though, was the AIM state contacts and SEA information. So in this section, there's actually a listing of who the state contacts are for every state. So if you happen to hear about something that's happening in another state and you want to know more about it, this will tell you where to go. And there's also a little bit, this, you see Alaska, well, let's go down to Wyoming. Don't seasick as I'm going down to Wyoming. Well, come on.
Oh, there we are.
There we go. So Leslie is the consultant for the visually impaired. She is the primary contact at this point, but you'll notice there are several things underneath. In addition to being able to contact her, there are several other things that have been put on the site. And one of the things that you can do is Leslie can ask us at any time to add more to this page, more information. Perhaps in some states, and I see that it's here as well, in your state, you have parent information and advocacy resources. There may be other resources you'd like to add. If there are, just go through Leslie, let us know, and we will put that information right on this page. Because if someone comes to us and says, you know, I'm from Wyoming and whatever, we may provide some level of general guidance, but we will always refer back to this page, because there are certainly differences where everyone is. So any questions about that? We're good?
We're good.
Okay, and then creating AIM is a pretty busy section that's going to have quite a lot in it. One big section relates to NIMAS, and people who are publishers' representatives who are creating those files may spend a great deal of time here. There are open educational resources and some guidance for that. There's also DAISY and NIMAS in HTML. There will also be at some point, this is an area that's going to be broadened quite a lot. What about those teacher-made materials, and how does a teacher make the materials they're using increasingly accessible? And a lot of that, you know, if you're making something in Word, how would you make sure that that thing you were making in Word had accessibility built into it as well? So this is a growing area. And I hope you'll come back and have a look at all of this much more closely. I also want to tell you, and this I'm gathering data, but I always try to poison the wells before I gather the data because I don't like this. But I'll just tell you that. These two little symbols are how you get the page to talk. So you highlight the page, and then you push this, and it speaks.
Review the NIMAS technical specification and information about MathML.
So, but that's also the pause button. So there's some interesting, my personal opinion is that's not quite as salient as I would like it to be, that this is where you go for it to talk, because I think that for many people, unless they're very web savvy and use the web to speak a lot, may not see those two little items as how I make this page speak. So I'm on an internal campaign to change those two icons. So far, advocacy from within is not making a lot of difference, but I'm working on it. So I often will say to people, so go to the page and then let me know how you make it talk, hoping that they won't find them, which is probably wrong, because lots of people, of course, are finding them without any trouble at all. That's just my particular, I don't know. I just don't think they're quite as, I'd like to see the one that looked like somebody talking or something. Too many years in the OGCOM world, I guess. So I want to go back to the AIM Navigator. The AIM Navigator is one of the decision-making tools that we have. And this particular tool, I filled in a few things just to make it a little bit quicker to get started. So what the home page of the Navigator does is it tells you a little bit about what's in the Navigator, that it's a process facilitator. It's not a smart tool. It doesn't make any decisions. It gathers data from a group who's talking and sharing, and helps put some questions in front of them that helps them, we hope, think well about accessible educational materials. The AIM Navigator may or may not be rebranded as the AEM Navigator, but that's not a requirement at this point. And so, but it will be available on the AEM page. I just happened to have opened it up before we started. So the process facilitator helps that collective team work through determining need, selection of materials that would address the student's need, acquisition of the materials, which you probably remember my saying last week, that lots of people really start at that acquisition place, and it really is not the place you want to start. You want to know what you're looking for and who you're talking about before you start thinking, where can I get those materials? And then the last section of the AIM Navigator is use and supports for use. There, that's better if I go up like that. So there are two levels of support. One is called Help Me Decide. So if you have a question that you're not sure about, Help Me Decide will give you some answers or some things to think about. And then another one called Tell Me More, and I'll show you those in a minute when we get in. There's also a student summary, and there's a help, and there's a to-do list, and the help is available all the time. So we're going to go to getting started, and the first thing you do to get started is enter the name, the grade, and the age of your student. And you don't have to use a real name if it's better to, for whatever reason, to not use a real name. This is material that you can recall, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment. I just want to tell you that the name I picked today is in honor of my aunt, who died way too young 30 years ago today, so I used her name as the student. She was not 17 when she died, though. Far too young to be dying. In any event, this one, it says enter an email address, and it says that it's optional. The reason it says optional is because you do not have to put it in there. However, this is the way you can get access to this information after you close down the tool. This means that if you don't put an email in there, never will you see again, nor will anybody else ever see again, what you have done in the Navigator. But if you put your address in there, you get a little link that only comes to that address that will take you back to the tool, and you can use it and add to it and change it even over years of time. It's very secure, because unless someone has that little link, they can't find it. I can't find it. No one at the AIM Center can find it. It's very possible that the Director of Technology at CAST, Boris, could find it if he needed to. However, I will tell you, he doesn't need to, nor does he want to. So you can consider this very safe information as far as using a student's name and putting in information about a student. So it also asks you to enter the team members completing the summary, and I put in just a few people, and we could add a few more. Let's put Ms. Bowser, is the AT specialist.
And don't you forget it.
That's right. And anyway, the main reason for doing this is you really want to know over time who has been a part of this discussion. And you can add as many names as you want right now. So we save and we continue. And that saves into this student summary that we'll see at the end. Then our next piece is we're actually now talking about Susan. But it's determination of need is a very quick kind of thing. And there are 3 questions you have. One of them is, this student can use standard print-based instructional materials used across the curriculum by other students. And we had quite a lot of discussion about what we wanted the feedback to be on this one. And I remember one of Scott's and Gail's and my good friends saying, perhaps the message should be, then what in the heck are you doing in this tool? However, we thought that probably wasn't the right one. So if you push this one, because sometimes you just need to go through this. Different people may have different opinions on whether or not the student needs this material. So it says, the team anticipates that this student will make adequate progress with reading and gaining information from grade level print-based materials. Evidence indicates that specialized formats of instructional materials are not needed at this time. Additional decision points and information contained in the navigator are not relevant to this student. So what happens then, if you select this one, when you come down and you save the summary, then it takes you right to the summary and says the other information is not relevant to this student. So even if you've done that and you've come to that decision, you still have some sort of documentation that you have actually considered or thought about this. And what the kind of feedback you get really tries to help you understand, wait a minute, by selecting this, what are we actually saying? So the second one, I'm going to go to the third one first. The second one is really about this student requires modified content or alternative materials. And this is really looking at, indeed, typical print-based materials. The student can't use typical print-based materials due to a disability that impacts comprehension of information. The decision points and information contained in the AIM Navigator are primarily related to specialized formats. However, learning more about AIM by completing the decision points in the Navigator may be useful when seeking materials for this student. So you could have a student who needed an alternate format of materials or an alternate, let me give you an example because it's always a little, let's say all of your class is reading Robinson Crusoe, but you have a few people in your class who need to read the start to finish versions of Robinson Crusoe, okay, that have really pared it down and kept all the critical elements, but a lot of the other kinds of details that are perhaps confusing to some students wouldn't be there. You may still need a specialized format of those alternate materials. So that's why it says, you're really encouraged to go all the way through, even though you're not going to be talking about exactly the same materials that are used by other students. The middle one is really probably the prime student that the Navigator is built for. And that's that evidence indicates that the student cannot use print-based instructional materials effectively at this time. The team anticipates that the student will make adequate progress if, and this is a big thing, if exactly the same information is presented in one or more specialized formats. And those formats are Braille, large print, audio, and digital text. So let's say that's true, and then it says, why did you decide that? So I put in a little bit here. This is just my typing in just before we came online. When Susan is expected to read printed materials independently, she has considerable difficulty reading the words and has very little comprehension of what she's read. Knowing this, she becomes very anxious. When presented with text that can be read aloud while she's looking at it, or even read aloud without text, her comprehension and application of the material is within grade level expectations. So that's a lot of, you actually have data mentioned there. If you don't, it's not numerical data, but they give you a lot of information about why she needs this. You can say, we're not sure yet, we just know she can't do this one thing. Whatever you put in is saved, and you continue to the next part. In this part about the selection of the formats that are needed, I also, thinking about Susan, I entered 3 mythical books that we would need in some sort of specialized format that are being used in Susan's English and Social Studies class. And there, you would not limit it to those classes, because you'll note over here, it says add row, so you can put as many rows as you need with books that would need to be in specialized formats. So her print materials are English 3, and the title is Keys to Good English 3, and I don't have an ISBN number because, as I said, it's mythical. And in English, in the subject English 3, they're also reading 5 Shakespeare plays. And that's a book, 5 Shakespeare plays. And U.S. history, the American experience, the first 100 years. Okay. Now, what if we don't know what we're talking about here? You notice up here, you see, help me decide. Excuse me. What is meant by the term related print core materials? And for all of these help me decides, to get an answer or something to think about, all you need to do is click, because these are pretty frequently asked questions. So rather than going into these in detail, let's go to the next screen, because we're just going to work on these 3 books right now. So we save to the summary and continue. And this is the place. Now you notice in that first one, even though I added some things in the discussion that led to the decision that she needs these materials, it didn't really say too much about her, just established the fact that these materials were needed. In this one, the instructional content, then what we really want to talk about is herself. What are her current needs, skills, and preferences? This would be the place where there would be some reference to why she was having the difficulty she was having, what strengths she has that could be built upon, what experiences perhaps she has with specialized formats. I didn't put anything in there. There are just some possibilities. And if you're not sure, then you can go over to, well, what aspects of the student's current skills should the team consider? And there's quite a list of things that the team might consider that they might jot down for Susan. You would have the same kind of support for environments in which specialized formats will be used. And then I did write in a little something for the tasks. As a high school junior, Susan has reading assignments, not 2, but in all of her, can actually fix that because I'm still live. So used to seeing these after they've already been printed. In all of her classes except physical education. Specifically, most of her classes are flipped. She's expected to have read a considerable amount of content before class, generally at home, before coming to the class where the content is discussed and acted upon. So it's really pretty clear that she has rather large reading, independent, or as independent as possible, reading assignments. So we can save that, and you wouldn't ever leave those blank. It would take such a long time. So what specialized formats are needed? We know that Susan is a student with learning disabilities, or we probably figured that out by now, even though it hasn't been written specifically. And so Susan is not going to be a person who needs Braille. She's not a person who has any visual impairment, so nor does she need large print. However, remember that we mentioned the audio and the text together. That would be the digital text format. And then sometimes the audio by itself may also be beneficial for her. Probably not as an either or, but as both sometimes, depending on the environments in which she's using them. So let's pick audio and digital text. And we'd want to also write in here, so what are the features of audio that would be needed to help Susan? And in what ways would the digital text format help her? And if we're unclear about what that might be, then we go right over here and we look at these frequently asked questions and see if one of them would help us make our decision. So let's save and continue. And this is where, to me, it's sort of, you see the navigator sort of doing something a little different than you could do on paper. What's happened here is that we have those 3 classes and those 3 books, but over here we have we have audio and digital text, which are the 2 formats that we selected for her. And what we're asked to think of now, let me undo these right now, is does she need Keys to Good English in digital text or audio? And let's just say digital text would be enough for this, because the Keys to Good English is about grammar and all of those things, which even if she's just has access to synthetic speech, seeing it at the same time is going to make a difference. The 5 Shakespeare plays, we want both the digital text and the audio. And I'll talk a little bit about, well, actually, I'll tell you right now that one of the things Susan's team would really need to discuss here is, so what kind of audio do we want for 5 Shakespeare plays? Should she have her 5 Shakespeare plays in synthetic speech, the computer speaking it, or should she have her 5 Shakespeare plays in natural human speech, which is another audio, and you get it in different places. So the reason it's important to think about those, I think for most of us, we would probably say, I don't mind if my computer reads me my Keys to Good English, but I want Liam Neeson to read me the 5 Shakespeare plays, please. To my knowledge, he's not recording for Learning Ally, but you never know. Certainly they have people who are reading that kind of English who have experience reading that, which is a very different thing. And then the U.S. history book, I think she might want to read this sometimes on her bus ride. That might be something that we put back in environment. Maybe we said that she has an hour bus ride each way every day, which is probably not uncommon for some of your students in Wyoming who may live a considerable distance from where a school might be located. So you can continue to add rows, make decisions, change those decisions. And by the way, if you've added that little email address to whom the link back to this can be used, then you can go in at any time and make changes and additions to what you've done. So we're going to save and continue. Anybody have a question at this point? How many more minutes do I have so that I don't go over what I should? Gail, I can see your lips moving, but I'm not good at that.
Our case presenter actually isn't here yet.
Okay, so we're good with what's in the door?
Another 5-7 minutes, or
okay, that's
here yet.
Super. So when we get to acquisition, again, this is the first place where people seem to want to start, but this is where qualification makes a difference. Qualification has not been an issue to this point. There has been need, there's been what is needed, and now the qualification actually comes from what sources can we use. And those of you who were here last week know that we spent a good bit of time on the 5 different sources. And if you're not sure what those basic sources might be, over here in the Help Me Decide, there's a question. What are the basic sources for acquiring textbooks and related core materials in specialized formats? The NIMAC, accessible media producers, commercial sources, free sources, and locally created, and a little bit about what each of those are. Because we do want to know what they are as we go along. But when you think about which ones can be used for your student, there are really only 3 questions about this, or 3 descriptions that will help you. The student meets copyright criteria for specialized formats, which means the student is a student with a disability that is causing them not to be able to read printed materials. Doesn't ask you what that condition is, just that there is a condition. And the student is served in special education under IDEA. Okay, so if you select that one, basically what it tells you is your student's the big winner as far as selection of formats, acquisition of formats, because you can use all of the sources. So if your student meets copyright criteria but is not served under IDEA, the only source that can't be used is the NIMAC, the NIMAS files that are deposited in the National Instructional Materials Access Center, or the NIMAC. But if your student does not meet copyright criteria for specialized formats, then the only sources available are commercial sources, free sources, and under some circumstances, locally created materials. You still have to be careful about copyright with what you're creating locally. Just because you chop and scan it yourself doesn't mean that you can broadly distribute what you've created. So what's interesting about this one is that you'll notice that it says student doesn't meet copyright criteria. There could be a student here who is served under IDEA, but whose team has determined that for whatever reason, they do not meet copyright criteria to use some of these formats. But again, I would go back over and I would read carefully through some of these things in order to, before making that decision, because many students with disabilities who are served under IDEA certainly have a condition that would be accompanied or would create a print disability. It isn't just blindness, visual impairment, physical disability, or the undefinable organic dysfunction. So, but this is the place where if you wanted to find out a lot more about all of that, you can go to the navigator and you can look this up, any of these up. Also, let me show you the Tell Me More here. So Tell Me More is like a book in the background, and the book repeats all the questions that are in the Help Me Decide, but then it goes much deeper. So I'm just scrolling through so you can see how many things. And now the questions aren't closed. The answers are just right there. And in addition to the things that were up in the Help Me Decide, then it talks a whole bunch more about what copyright criteria are, who's an authorized user, what the Chafee Amendment is, what about those teacher-made materials, lots and lots. And then it has a section called AIM Center Resources, and this is in every part of the book, not just this particular one. And it has resources within the AIM Center that can help you with this. And then it has references and resources that are not in the AIM Center that can help you make these kinds of decisions. Quite honestly, if you want to be an absolute genius and know everything there is to know, which doesn't mean necessarily a lot sometimes, one of the ways you can do it is you can go in and you can print out the print navigator version of this, where you can see all of this as a book. And it's a great way to really build knowledge and skills for yourself. And I'm going to close this. I think I'm just going to close this one window. Somewhere it says close under. Oh, sorry. I have to move you guys a little bit. Come on, tell me more. Oh, there we go. Close window. Knew there was a little cue somewhere. So that's the acquisition part. And then we get to the part where I think most of us who have any experience in assistive technology knows that many times people think, okay, here's the thing, go for it, do well. And we know that that's one of the reasons that a lot of people don't do well. So when we think about supports for use of this accessible content, I need to save and continue. And then it asks us about 5 different things: the technology, the training, and it's not just training for the student, but for the educators and the family, what's going to be needed. And again, we have Help Me Decide and Tell Me More over here. Then it wants to know, are there instructional strategies that particularly need to be used for the student to use these materials effectively? Is there perhaps a different way of questioning, or what levels of support and what expectations should we have? And then we have other support services that might be needed, or accommodations and modifications. And I have to tell, since Scott's in the group, I'm going to tell the story about when we were making a DVD that supports this work as well. Scott was one of the SAGE people who was talking about the materials. And we put a sentence in that the whole script had to be vetted by OSEP. So once it was there, it stayed. There was very little ability to change it. And so Scott was recording along, and we came to this part about, are there other accommodations and modifications needed? And I can't see Scott's face now in my little group of people that I can see. There you are. I see you now. And so Scott said, well, you might, in the script had said, preferential seating, because like if you're listening to something with earphones, you might need to be in a relatively quiet environment. And when we talked about it before, Scott said, I just don't use that term very much. So when the person asked him that question, he said, well, you might need to provide preferential treatment, at which at which everybody just burst out laughing. And fortunately, we had a wonderful group working with us. And so Scott, I always tell them when they're listening to the DVD, you hear Scott say, preferential seating, very distinctly. So that's about the quickest overview of the AIM Navigator I've ever given, except for the funny little stories. So let me show you what you get. This is the student summary. Now you notice we didn't put in a lot of things, so there are a lot of places where there won't be much there. But when I put something in, it gave me exactly what choice we made, and then the evidence, the information, and the evidence that led to that. In selection, remember that I had only put something in tasks. I didn't put anything in student or in environments. And then when we actually got to the formats, I selected some, but I didn't put in any features that should be considered. And then in acquisition, she doesn't meet copyright, so we know, and I should have put she did, but you know, she would have, this student would have. But it just tells us that this is where we can get those materials for her. And then for use, again, I didn't put anything, so there's nothing there. But maybe we needed to go back and have another meeting where we come back and talk about those things because we talked about them. You know, we spent a lot of time and all of that. So what it does is it gives you the little checklist. Did you do all of these things? And they did ask us when they were making the student summary, they said, so if there are places where they didn't do anything, like where you see students' current skills, needs, and abilities, do you want us to just drop those off the report? And we said, absolutely not, because if there's nothing entered there, then there would be, if I were the administrator who was reviewing this, or someone on another team, or a newbie to the team who was doing this, I wouldn't know what had happened before, and I would really want to go back and find out more about these things. And if they dropped off, you wouldn't even know that they were missing necessarily. So anytime the team doesn't put at least something in there that has been a part of their discussion in their decision making, then the printable summary stays with empty spaces. So I'm going to stop the share and come back to you. And wanted to know if anybody has any questions at this time. And I don't hear anything, so I get the only people with an open mic is you guys at Echo, so I win. Excuse me. Gail, did you have something?
Yeah, I do, Joy. This is sort of a way back to last week question, but it didn't occur to me until you'd gotten started. The difference between accessible educational materials and accessible instructional materials? None.
Not really, no. It's basically that OSEP just changed their language when they were putting, they were doing some redoing about how things fit under technology, and they put educational materials. I think the other difference, and I'm sorry I accidentally cut you off when you were still asking your question, so I may have gone the wrong direction. That's never happened before, has it? So basically I think that change came about because some people, it was never our interpretation of it, but I think there may have been some people who interpret it instructional as only what the teacher uses to teach the child, where educational seemed a bit more inclusive of whatever is being used in the educational process, whether it be a supplementary reader or an independent whatever. The thing it doesn't do is it doesn't, because it's still, the statutory language still relates to print. So we go beyond print because we know that the environment is different, but we're not going to see those statutorily. But maybe educational brings us a little bit further out into the digital materials, perhaps, or to other materials besides print in any event, which all need to be accessible. Did that help?
Yeah, so there's no, I just want to confirm, because I think it's important for us to know in terms of how we do things. The question occurred to me when you were talking about students who do need modified content.
Right.
And we know that there are kids who need modified content, but when you, is it accurate to say that when you need to acquire specialized formats under all the resources that we have, those students and their modified content don't really technically fit into the category of green?
I would say that they do. We have to be careful that we don't say somebody doesn't fit, because it would be if someone, let's say someone has Down syndrome, but they can understand a great deal more by hearing and seeing the materials together. And they're a person who has some reading skills. It may be that the print disability, that is caused by the cognitive disability, or the chromosomal disability, which many people would say is a physical disability because we can actually name the chromosome that causes it. So when we start thinking about where we can get some, I think the key question is, when we think about a specialized format of a material, whatever that material is, the specialized format is going to be exactly the same, content-wise. Won't look the same necessarily, but so when a publisher publishes a book, if you get a specialized format of that book, you're not going to have simplified or changed or modified content in any way. It's just going to be the way the material comes to the student, the perception that they use to get that information. So I think it's also possible, like in the very large libraries like Bookshare and Learning Ally, that once your student meets the criteria to get materials from those libraries, there is not, to my knowledge, any restriction on you getting a material that's written at a lower level if it happens to be there. So you always want to look around and see if there's something that may not be exactly the same, but if it's modified content, it may actually be very useful for this student. It's sort of a gray area. Are you supposed to go in and only get what everybody else is using or not? And so we're just going, well, you need to get what works for the kid.
Okay. There's a wonderful video of a student like that, like the one we're talking about who actually has Down syndrome, on the Family Center for Technology and Disability website. It's called Meet Jean, and she is a student who's in a general education environment with all kinds of modifications to the content that are all done on her tablet. So I would recommend that people take a look at that video if you want to know who we're talking about here.
That would be great. And then also make sure that remember that section I showed you in the AIM Center, Bailey is a student with autism. And so that's always another big question. Does someone with autism qualify? Well, if the person has a reading disability, absolutely. And even if the person doesn't have a reading disability, they may need something. And we can't, one of the things that the statute actually says is that just because there's not a file available to create this material in a specialized format, or just because there's one other just because the student doesn't meet copyright criteria, does not relieve the state or local education agency in any way from providing materials to them in a way that can be used by them. So.
Great.
Anybody else?
Any questions here in the room? In the virtual room?
Katie, we can see your eyes just peeping over the top. So it's funny, whenever we're virtual, I'm sort of, to see her, I was going, like I really could just see down better if I moved my position. So Anne, did you have a question? No, it's not. She's like, what? Okay, well, it was nice to be here with you. If you have no more questions today, I'm not going to be able to stay. I would love to stay because I thoroughly enjoyed your case study last week and the discussion that went on around that case study. And hopefully I'll be able to observe again.
Yes, absolutely. You're welcome back anytime. You're permanently on our mailing list, so you'll receive those pieces, but we'd love to have you back. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise. And I know that many of us here in the room and others in the state are excited about the updates to the AIM website and being able to provide that as a resource. So thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So with that being said, we'll turn it over to, we have one case presentation this week, and we actually have two other individuals who joined us. So if we can go ahead and if you would introduce yourself to the rest of the room.
I'm Nancy Bergenty.
And you're from?
Albany County School District.
Perfect. And then?
I'm Catherine Bergman, and I'm a speech therapist here in Wyoming with Albany County School District.
And Catherine has taken our courses and has also presented cases, and so she's got a new student she's bringing to us today, and this is ECHO case ID 5785. So if you want to go ahead, talk about this individual.
Nancy and I actually share this student. My hopes for coming here today is to kind of get some ideas on what to do with this student, because I'll give you a little background history on her, but her skills are diminishing. Her brain is shrinking and becoming smooth, and so therefore, instead of making ground, we're actually losing ground. And so I was kind of hoping to tap into you guys to figure out what kinds of things we need to put in place right now so that as she her skills decrease, we have a good skill set in place, if that's possible. So just a little bit about this student is that they were concerned that she didn't have as many words as her peers, and then as they started working with her, and they saw that she definitely needed more assistance than just speech. So I can't really tell you what they all did at the preschool level, but when she came to kindergarten, she had some rote phrases like, "Where's mommy?" and "Where's her brother?" And I actually had taught her, "Where is your mom?" and she would say, "At home." So we had some sort of communication. She could sing. She could sing Christmas carols. She could sing the birthday song. What else could she do? She was definitely into kind of some play. She would play with toys if they were facilitated. So we could give her a baby and she would kind of hold the baby kind of after a model. However, let me step back that she does have bilateral hearing loss, so she is aided, and then she does wear some leg braces too. Since kindergarten, she has seen lots of specialists. They've gone to Denver Children's, they've gone to Salt Lake. It was originally thought that she had Prader-Willi syndrome, which is wanting to eat, as well as Angelman syndrome, which would make sense why when we do PECs, all she's really motivated by is food items. But so over the past couple of years, she has lost her ability to get up and down off of the floor without assistance. She's not saying any words. She's not even saying her name. She's not waving hi and bye like she used to. I did note that she's whining. I don't know any other way to express it. It's not even vocalization. And sometimes the pitch varies, but it's usually, we don't know why. I would like to say it's because she's in pain or she's uncomfortable with something, but that's just a mere guess. We have done PECs with her, and we had gotten to phase 3 where she was discriminating, and over the summer she actually lost that ability to even discriminate. and she wasn't discriminating really well. She was just taking him off the right side and off the bottom. But I felt like at least some days she was scanning and making efforts, and we have data that shows that she did have some good days with it. But over the summer, she lost all of that, and now we're just back to phase one of basically handing the picture icon to the communicative partner. And she does pretty good if you're sitting on her right side and you have the item and your hand placed in the same spot. But the minute that you move your hand or move it back, then she misses that target. Lots of times she'll take it and put the picture icon in her mouth. And so then you have to have that second prompter. We're not even away from that second prompter yet to get it out of her mouth and do some hand over hand kinds of things. She has lost the ability to like hold on to the notebook and take it off. So we've added like putty kind of stuff to lessen the Velcro, so to make it easier for her to grab. Sometimes that helps and sometimes it doesn't. She's pretty impulsive, I would say. And one other thing that I think is unique is motivated as she is to eat. If she drops a Cheerio or cracker or whatever we're working on that day, she doesn't even look down to pick it up out of her lap. It's just gone. So can't think of anything else. But I just would kind of like your guys' input on, since we're sliding, where do we go next? As far as like interacting with people, I sometimes don't even feel like she knows that there's anybody else in the room. She won't, if there's a loud sound, sometimes it will startle her, but she won't necessarily look to see what that sound was. She will make eye contact, but you need to be really up close and in her face to kind of make that, and that's a hit and miss on those days too. And she is pretty tangential. Some days she'll have really good days where her PEX is working really well, and then other days it seems like all we do is hand over hand with her. She struggles with eating, and Nancy works with her on eating and all of those kinds of tools. She does pocket some, so we have to really be mindful of that, her pocketing as well. So she's very complicated and in-depth. Breaks my little heart that we are seeing such a decline in her performances. So, are there any questions? Yeah, I kind of went through it pretty fast. Is there anything you want to add, Nancy?
Well, she lost so many of her self-help skills as well. We used to do a lot of backwards cheating with her, and she would be able to remember. And a lot of those skills are gone. And very, very seriously, she lost 15 pounds, was it last year? This year she's put on 2, probably close to having a G2, but and I've tried to do some switch activities and basic activation toy activities with her. And like Catherine was saying, there's some days where she'll like press a toy that will activate music or something with her thumbs, and sometimes she'll activate the iPad with her thumbs, and then there's other days where she won't do much of anything.
And the weight loss is not a lack of us not feeding her, because she gets to school and has breakfast, then I do PEX with her, and then 30 minutes later she has lunch, and then they have an afternoon snack, and then then she eats again right before she goes home. So she's definitely getting enough calories. I think that's all we do is feed her. But yeah, she just continues to decline, and it seems like it's not, there's an overall decline, but one area seems to take a hit the most. Like the first summer, it was more of her gross motor skills, and then the second summer was more like her communication, and then it seems like this year her eating has diminished, so it's kind of enclosed. So, and she has had genetic testing. They're waiting on mom. The last time mom came to talk to us, she was saying that they're on a wait list because they want to do a more extensive panel of genetic testing, but it costs so much, and since she doesn't have a diagnosis, Medicare won't pay for the extensive test because they don't have a diagnosis, but in order to get a diagnosis, they have to do it. So mom's kind of frustrated with that. She does get Botox in her legs, and they do whatever they can to try to help her. So I don't know. Sorry. I can bird walk on all different levels of where she's at.
So what questions do people in the room have, or go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I just had a question. If the parents have shared that they've noticed a change in interaction with family members as well?
Oh yeah, they say that it's pretty much non-existent.
Okay.
All she does is kind of pace around their house, and that's where she's most comfortable at school, is walking. Yeah, so I don't think that she's really aware of anybody at their house, and they just had a new baby, and I don't think that she even knows that there's an additional family member added to their family.
Additional questions?
Nancy, did you guys get any kind of standardized receptive language score, or do you guys have a ballpark idea?
We can't even use a standardized instrument with her anymore of any sort.
I don't even think like the Battelle would give us a good indication. I mean, it's because it's that like parents fill out, but like even, I mean, she doesn't make eye contact, and that's, or it's hit and miss. I mean, there's absolutely no like babbling of any sort. We can't elicit any sounds. There's no self-help. It seems just like a walking infant.
Go ahead, Gail.
Yeah, I was curious, when you speak to her, when you say, you know, it's time for a snack or whatever, do you have the impression that she's understanding you? Is the loss total communication, or is it only
loss? We have to, it's pretty much hand over hand. We have to guide her over. And even if the snack is sitting on the table, we still have to physically help her to sit down. So even that motor memory of how to sit is diminishing too.
Wow.
Go ahead, Chris.
Hi. Just a question. You mentioned that she does like to walk. And she's walking and walking. Is she walking into walls or walking into tables or anything like that, or is she discriminating and walking around those things or through doorways?
Yeah, she loves to try to go into doors, into open classrooms. She has walked into a bar out on the playground just because she's unaware. And she doesn't know proximity either. So like if I were to stand in front of her, because I always try to make a point to say hi to her, she'll walk as right up next to me. So that where she is in relationship to everybody else. But there is lots of hand holding so that she is safe.
And she has a pair with her all the
Yeah,
time.
she has a one-on-one, a full-time one-on-one.
Other questions? Go ahead, Katie.
Have you guys ever taught her sign language in the past that you could build off of that again?
She knows food. This is all she'll do the whole time.
Okay.
So that's, but then it loses its meaning when that's all she's doing, because you don't, I mean, we can't just, we do feed her all the time. And to be honest, I don't even know if I've seen her sign food this year.
I haven't seen it this year.
So, go ahead, Mindy.
So she's able to still eat food.
She is. I would say most of what we give her is mechanical soft. Because some days, and I give her Cheerios, but we have to really be mindful of putting a drink in there, and then sometimes we've even had to discontinue working with Cheerios because all she's done is just pocket.
And again, you talked about her signing food. If you sign to her, does she have any signs she understands?
No.
Wow. Okay.
Go ahead. Anybody on the line or anybody here in the room? Do you guys have suggestions?
Well, I was thinking, have you guys heard of the Every Move Counts assessment? It's going to look at different sensory modalities. It's wonderful for beginning communicators. And it's going to look at things like smell. You're going to use, say, lavender, and then you're going to use things like vinegar. And you're really looking for preferred, non-preferred. So it goes through the tactile, the taste, touch, what are all the T's? Movement, vestibular, little bit of sound, but it objectively looks at these sensory modalities, and then eventually you can pair it into the next part, the clicks and checks, with the switch use. So it's a great assessment just for.
It's interesting because she has lost so much. You can feed her anything, hot, cold, spicy, and she has no discrimination of taste whatsoever. I don't even, like you say, even with sound, the startle, she doesn't turn to sound. I mean, it's very low functioning, but it'd be interesting to see the test.
Because when she came from the preschool to us, their goal was to locate sound, and she couldn't even do that. Even between preschool and kindergarten, she had kind of lost that ability to discriminate where the sound was coming from.
It would be very helpful if anybody had any ideas about her being able to express pain or discomfort, because she's frequently ill and has lots of muscle spasms, and she just cries, and we don't know, like she won't, sometimes she'll point to her foot, but we don't know if anybody has any ideas. That would be really helpful too.
Gail?
A couple things. First of all, I'm wondering if you folks are aware of any resources that might help the family get that medical information. We can make suggestions for how to deal with her in school, but as fast as she's going downhill, it seems to me that it would be really important to understand medically what was going on.
So she is on the waiver. In Wyoming, we have 2 different waivers, and you guys can probably attest to this. So she's on one, but it doesn't cover everything like the other one does. I don't know the difference between the two, and doesn't pay as much either. So like the family is getting some support, like somebody that comes in to help give mom a break and that kind of stuff. But I know it doesn't necessarily pay for like food and diapers and those other areas that she needs. And then the doctors in Salt Lake are looking into helping her, or helping the parents try to get that other genetic testing completed.
Yeah, the guy that I observed, the parents probably already know, but he comes and does the genetic clinics from Salt Lake. Probably what they're looking at doing is that microarray testing, which is like your cookbook of your genes. but it might not necessarily pinpoint what they need. And you're right, insurance often doesn't cover your
Yeah, and it's like
micro rate.
30,000. I mean, it's
Yeah, it's outrageous.
like a new house.
But they have their own testing center there in Salt Lake, don't they? They use their own lab right there, the University of Utah. So maybe they could help this family out.
I think there are a couple of other things that, like, supports that we can talk about offline that may, I mean, depending on what strategies have been used. And they're being seen at primary children's, not down at Colorado Children's.
They've been there, and now they're going to Salt Lake.
Now they're going to Salt Lake. Okay. Yeah, so we can share. That's a great idea. Gail, we have some additional recommendations.
Yeah, and I think I noted too, they have, the family does take her to hippotherapy, as well as now she's in ballet, dance, and swimming. I think she's most comfortable in the water because of her musculature and tightness, and she just likes it. And they do lots of stretches, and she goes with the school one time a week swimming, and then this spring she'll start going twice for a little bit.
Are there any things that specifically comfort her, even to go to sleep at night? Or
I don't think she sleeps well. I think they do put leg braces on her. When she's napped at school, she's a quick napper. It's like 5 minutes, and then she's almost like startled awake, except for when I tell Nancy that she's going to it's a fast napper, and then she slept for like 30 minutes. But she gets on some medication, and I think that they do give her a night, like a sleeping pill at night to kind of help her.
I just didn't know if she had any comfort items or any.
I would say walking and food.
And a beanbag chair, like the supportive.
Gail, you said one recommendation. Do you have others?
Well, I think that Darcy mentioned the Remove Counts assessment. I think another assessment that you might want to think about that might help you target specifics is the communication matrix assessment, just because it breaks communication down into such tiny pieces. And I think if you did communication matrix, which would give you real specifics about her current communication state, and then every move counts for more about preferred items and things like that, you'd have a good picture of her. The other thing that I think that might give you is a picture of, in actuality, how fast things are changing. You know, if you did it now and in 2 months or 6 months, you could describe to other people the kinds of changes you're seeing in her, the downhill changes, or the positive changes, if that's how it works out. So that's a second recommendation. The other thing I wonder is, have you tried? Well, I don't have a good picture. Does she have no expressive communication? What's her expressive language like? That's it. Okay, well, is it differentiated at all? Does she use some sounds like that sometimes, and other times she's quiet, or is she always noisy?
She does have moments of quietness, but then it's like, well, what's wrong? Why are you too quiet? Because that's usually not her state. So yeah, it's just basically a whine, a consistent whine. I would say.
All the time?
The majority of the time.
You mentioned dance. Is she reacting at all in class? Are you aware of music or any kind of? Does she act?
I've not been with her.
Okay.
That'll happen in that pool.
I was also thinking of something I have in my office. You guys are welcome to borrow it, and it's the communication symbolic behavioral scale.
Okay.
So, I mean, you can start as low as 9 months. I think maybe even 7 to 8 months. And it's often used for autism testing, but it looks at those things like, do they have any kind of communication intention? You know, it's got a baby doll in it and some blocks, so it's normed for toddlers. If you guys are welcome, it might give you some good information.
Well, and anything tangible always goes right in her mouth.
Even the switches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And she is like, her thumb is just completely red from, and she is not necessarily sucking on it, but chewing on it. So she chews
on everything.
And then she'll chew on her knuckles and anything that she can get her hands on, she chews on. But I think that symbolic scales would almost be too high for her.
What? As I listen, this is hard. You brought a hard case, so it's really making me think. I assume the rest of you too.
You're welcome.
That's why we
exactly.
Try to get.
It seems to me like one of the program goals for her, as I hear you talk, might be to think about figuring out the ways to make her more easy to care for. Mm-hmm. Like if in fact she's always making sounds, and there were any way to teach her the quiet, or a time to be quiet, that could go a long way for families, for classroom staff, for a lot of folks, to just make it easier to be with her and to care for her. So I wonder what you're doing in that area and how you're thinking about it.
I hadn't even thought of that. So that's a good, I mean, we try to be like, shh, so lots of times, this sounds bad, but she and another student end up in like a little bit smaller room where when she's making all of these vocalizations, that they're not just, that she and the other student aren't disrupting the learning of that of others. And even we try to kind of say, shh, it doesn't matter. She doesn't really acknowledge. So, but that's one area we can definitely work on with her.
Okay, well, I think it's something to think about just for the sake of, of everyone's sanity, and for if she is less, if it's possible to teach her to be less disruptive, then she gets to be more included.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. Does she come through by music or any sound? Like if you could, I suspect that she's having pain or issues that she can't communicate, and so she whines. So like a baby, you try to anticipate what to do to comfort her, which isn't, and sometimes she's tired. In fact, last time she went to Salt Lake, I asked that question, is there anything that we can do to help her with pain management? Is there anything we can do about the constant chewing? I really didn't get any answer. So like I said, anticipate, make her comfortable, try to massage her legs, and
like, because you mentioned that she used to sing Christmas carols and those kinds of things. I wonder if something like that would be comforting to her because it would bring back something that she might remember, or
it depends. I mean, I think there's times when she will listen to someone read a story. I don't know if she understands it, but I think she finds comfort in the beanbag and the quiet, lower light, and those kinds of, that kind of environmental thing she'll enjoy. But on those days when she's, we guess she's having discomfort, but it just doesn't seem like there's very much to do. Anyway.
Chris, go ahead.
Hi, just just another thought. I mean, I think it sounds like everybody's in agreement that you want more information, and we really need more information to try to help. But thinking about the sensory stuff that Darcy was talking about, and really looking at that, what I'm wondering is, depending on how that pans out, since she does like to eat the switches and such, but she does like to walk, somehow mounting those switches in different places. So there's one at the table, there's one, I don't know, going out to the playground or something like that. There's one outside each door, so she can just say hi if she's passing, something like that. And my thinking is, and if I'm off, guys, please really let me know, because this is just going through my head now. But if we can get her to buy into something like this or whatever, then when she is in pain, that there could be a spot for pain, and there's a switch there, and when she's upset or whatever, that she could touch that. And it doesn't have to be, just a flat switch or something with an icon. It could have a tactile symbol or something, or a tactile object on it, something that is meaningful for her, depending on how that sensory assessment comes out. But anyway, that's the only thing I can think of at this point without more information. But even that we really need more information, I think. Good luck with her. She sounds like, somebody my heart goes out to, and I want to help her with everything I can. But I just don't have enough. I'm sorry.
This is one more question you
No,
may not
that's
have.
fine. I will field questions all day long. We really want to do it best for her. And her IEP is coming up next. Her triennial IEP is coming up. So we want to have as many suggestions and things to put in place, and
Right.
had trials. And
I just wonder if she's reacted to physical touch much. Like you say, she's in pain. Have her parents tried any kind of massage or physical therapy type things? You're aware of? In terms of comfort?
Nancy will do some massage type things. It just depends on the day. Lots of times, I mean, she never winces like you would think, like it would hurt. She never does any of that. Sometimes she vocalizes. It's really hard to tell
if it helps or not.
Yeah, it's not like after we get a massage, we're like, oh yes, I'm ready to go. That's definitely not a reaction that we see from her.
But can you tell if she winces more or less, or is that there's not really a correlation?
I would say that there's no correlation. She's pretty flat affect. She doesn't smile. She doesn't. She'll cry, but yeah, there's no smiling. There's no laughing.
And you did say that the family has some sort of respite.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, we'll additionally provide some resources about those kinds of supports as well. So, when Gail's talking about, giving people the tools, we can provide some of those as well. Any other thoughts, questions?
This is pretty off the wall, but I always want to try, like Chris was saying, switches that talk, or options for voice output, even when you just don't know, or you don't think so. I guess a suggestion might be to borrow some kind of simple voice output communication device with 4 or 5 choices that the Echo Library has, the Water Library has, and just play with it, make it a communication game, if nothing else, to see if anything might come of it. And you may have already done that, but I thought I'd say it.
Nope, we're open for anything now. I kind of feel like we're just, with doing PECs, it's not yielding anything, and so it's like, okay, we need to try something new.
Well, something new, if you used voice output, would give you, the PECs, all the features of PECs, but with sound attached to it. And sometimes it makes a difference, sometimes it doesn't. But again, it's a way of assessing what's going on until you get better medical information.
Okay, well, any other questions or any other
One
thoughts?
or
of anybody
two. Well, they probably looked at like a GI doctor for the gastroenterologist. Wonder if she's having that kind of pain, or make me think of like a metabolic kind of disease too with that. Which I'm sure they probably screen the blood, and they do those panels, I think, at Salt Lake, and screen out those. But they have all the specialists over there to do it. That's a good place to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Any thoughts, Scott or Katie or Virginia, Chris?
Yeah, no, my thought initially was right along with what Darcy had said about the every move counts and being able to systematically go through that process, since it sounds unfortunately like she's lost ground and stuff like that. And as Gail had mentioned, I think you'll end up getting a good picture of what she is capable of doing currently at this point in time. But then also, as Gail had mentioned, in 6 months or 6 weeks or whatever, being able to go back and see whether or not there is some progress or if she's continuing to lose some ground. So.
Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for giving us the most difficult echo case today. We appreciate it. We'd love for you to come back and let us know what's going on with this and a couple of the other cases you presented on. So
I would love to just get permission and show you guys a video of her.
yeah, that'd be great. Thanks to everybody who joined us on the line. Next week we'll be talking about some specific local resources and kind of translating what Joy was talking about into, what do you do when you live in Wyoming and you need AIM and additional services, and then we'll have a couple of other follow-up case presentations. So as always, if you have cases you want to present, give us a call. We'd love to hear about students in your district, with whatever questions, or just even an opportunity for you to share a student that you've been doing some great AT work with. Please bring those to us. Otherwise, same time, same place. We'll see you guys next Monday. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.